So I'm Talib, happily in recovery, former addict. I'll probably start off with I was born in the 80s. During the 80s, there was a lot of drugs. It was basically the cocaine epidemic. I was in Philadelphia, that city of brotherly love, supposedly. So my mom was with my dad for a while, and she realized that he was using and he was starting to act wild. So she couldn't leave us in that situation. It was me and my brother. We were babies. So she started packing up and figured out a way to move us out of there. She told him that we was going on vacation and we never returned. We moved to Texas with my grandparents, and we ended up living on the border of Mexico. Unbeknownst to her, that was the city where most of the drugs came into the United States. So fast forward, it was me, my mom, my aunt, my cousin, my grandma, and my grandfather. We all lived in one household. We were trying to do our thing, trying to survive, but things just kept coming. So my mom and my aunt decided to find a house, but we moved to the poor side of town because they were struggling. So meanwhile, while we was moving to that poor side of town, I ended up getting involved in a lot of things. There was a lot of gangs in the area, a lot of drugs. So fast forward a little bit, as I got a little older, I realized I was a decent athlete. So I started playing sports, but I was living two lives because I was playing sports, but I was still in the streets. And a lot of people didn't know. And my mom was really overprotective. So she used to keep me in the house. So I would sneak out every night and go do my thing and then come out and try to act like the regular square kid. People looked up to me for whatever reason. I was always just somebody people wanted to be around. I mean, I guess that's a blessing from Allah. But I used to bring people into my crap. I used to try to bring people to do the wrong thing because to me, it was cool. To me, it was exciting. I liked that thrill to be doing drugs and, selling. Originally, I just started selling drugs. I never really did drugs for a long time. It took a long time for me to get to that point where I wanted to use. So fast forward a little bit more. Now I'm playing sports. I'm a football player. I run track. I was traveling all over the country running track, but I was still involved in the streets. So I'd be in other towns or other states and I'd be running, but yet I was still bringing drugs with me and selling those drugs to different people and kind of corrupting the other athletes. While I was doing that, I got caught up and I got arrested. I was at 12 years old, my first time getting locked up. And, it hurt my heart seeing my mom cry, and seeing how she was struggling with seeing me like that. And, how it is when you get locked up, it only lasts but for a second. And then next you're back off to the races, doing your thing. So my mom ended up marrying my football coach, and we moved to a better side of town. And I did well for a little while, but then I went right back to what I was doing. And my football coach was also my principal. So every time I get in trouble, he would find ways to get me out of it because he wanted me to be in the games. And that was another reason why I really wasn't good in school, because every time I would mess up in class or if I didn't do a test, they'd find ways around it because in Texas, football is big. So, they want you to play in the game and they'll just push you along. They don't care if you're not learning anything. If you're a good athlete, they just let it be. So that made me, entitled. And being as though I was entitled, I thought that everything was supposed to be given to me. A lot of people that were around me wanted to be around me, so I ended up creating a kind of like little gang or whatever. So while we was doing that, I was again an athlete, but while I was that gang, we started doing all kinds of crimes. We started doing breaking and entering. We were robbing people. We were doing all kinds of things. But the crazy thing is, we was athletes. So a lot of times, people wouldn't think that we were the ones, doing these things. I found out later on in life from these kids I grew up with that their parents were connected to what they call the Mexican mafia, because Mexico was 15 minutes away from my city. So their dads would bring me in and they started giving me drugs, started giving me work to sell. So as I was growing up, like I said, I grew up with these people and they saw me as their kids and they put their kids into the family business, which was dealing narcotics. So I jumped right in wholeheartedly. I was selling heroin, I was selling cocaine, and I was selling weed. This is only like maybe 13, 14, 15. Kept doing that. My mom always said she wanted to move back to the East Coast from Texas, and we always just ignored her. She was always talking about it. It was like a pipe dream. Then one day she comes home and decides we're moving from Texas back to Jersey, back to the East Coast. So we pack up and leave. We tried to fight her on it. You know, I wanted to stay there because that's where I was comfortable. So anyway, we moved back. Now we're on the East Coast. And now I'm trying to do my best to stay out of trouble. I'm focusing on my sports. I was a freshman doing varsity football, doing varsity track, you know, and that was unheard of for a lot of people. So, you know, my talents were helping me. But I connected with the wrong people again. And now I started selling drugs again, back into the same thing. As I was growing up, as I continued to live in the East Coast and I continued to do those things, I wasn't getting caught up. So I was a little safer about it. But, you know, stuff a lot, I was still dealing with those drugs. So I ended up getting kicked off the track team because they found out what I was doing. And I ended up getting a really bad injury my sophomore year, tore my hamstring. That was the first time I started taking opiates. I had gotten a script for Perks, and I fell in love with them. And while taking those things, I felt like Superman. So I continued to run on a bad leg, even though I had the pain because it was dawing that, you know, making me numb. And I kept going on until about my junior year in high school. And after that, I kind of just fell to the wayside because I wasn't running the times I was supposed to be running. The times I was used to run, I wasn't starting on the football team anymore. And that was the beginning of the end. Because when I stopped playing my sports, I had no reason to try to be good anymore. Now I'm just hitting the streets. I'm just in it, you know, 10 toes deep. And I just didn't care anymore because the only thing that I loved was my sports. So now I'm into the drugs even harder. I'm using them all the time. You know, I'm getting other people hooked. I graduate just barely, you know, because again, the school wasn't anything to me. So now I'm in college, and now I'm going to college, and I'm still selling. I would get a refund every year because my mom's job paid for school. So every time I get that tax refund, I would end up going buying more drugs and flooding the area with it. I ended up dropping out of college, never finished, and I ended up going to a trade school. When I went to that trade school, I was going to become an electrician. But during my time at that school, I ended up meeting some guys, and we committed a robbery. We robbed somebody for money and drugs. And I got caught, and the one boy snitched on me. And so we had a case pending, but I finished electrical school. And then I didn't know at the time until later on, but one of my teachers was selling perks. So I started selling perks for my teacher. And I graduated, continued on with him. And a little further down, the cops finally caught up with me because, you know, it takes a while for the case to be heard. So it was like a year and a half. I thought that, you know, I slid free. So a year and a half later, they come and, you know, and I got to go to court. They were talking about giving me 15 years for a robbery and assault. But alhamdulillah, I ended up only serving a little bit of time for it. At this point, this is when I'm looking more into Islam as well. Because I always knew that Jesus wasn't God. And my grandparents were, you know, big Christians, but my mom really wasn't a church person. So when I was younger, living with them, they used to take us to church. But I always would question everything, and they would just try to shut me up, you know, push me away. So like I said, the second time I got in trouble, I started looking at Islam. I read the documentary Malcolm X, which, like so many people, reading that book really opened my eyes and kind of changed my life. Alhamdulillah for that. But I still didn't become Muslim. I never took Shahada. But in my mind, I was Muslim. If anybody ever asked me, I would tell them I was Muslim. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to do any of those things, but I was Muslim. That's what, if you ask me, that's what I would say. So anyway, I ended up going to jail for a little bit of time, and then I got blessed and got on house arrest. I was the first person in my county to get house arrest. So while I was doing house arrest, I started going back and doing pills. I was working as an electrician during the day, but I would spend most nights selling them pills. People was coming to my house while I was on house arrest. I forgot to mention my mom used to let me and my brother smoke weed in the house, and that kind of, you know, made it easier for us to continue doing what we was doing because she smoked as well. So there wasn't really any structure as far as stopping us from doing things. And my mom ended up buying weed off of me one time, and that's how she found that I smoked. My brother snitched on me, said I was selling, so she bought off me, and then it was a wrap after that. So my house became the party house. Anybody wanted to smoke or drink or whatever, they came over my house. So my house was always popping every night, nothing but people over. Um, so I was working, like I said, I was working as an electrician. While I was doing that, um, people would be coming to my job and buying from me. And I think my boss kind of had a feeling what was going on. So I turned it on him and tried to make it seem like he was in the wrong and snapped on him. So then he ended up firing me. So then I was unemployed for a while. So I started doing side jobs. But while I was doing those side jobs, my addiction kept getting bigger and bigger because now I didn't have to wake up to go to work. Because now I can make my own hours, and I was getting paid more money because it was all my money for the jobs. So now I'm doing like 4 or 5 80s a day, like it was nothing. And I wasn't really smoking anymore because the perks was, you know, more my twist. So excuse me. So I started selling more of those perks because I wanted perks and oxys because to support my. Now I'm at this point really not making money. I'm basically just breaking even. Excuse me. And another time, and but this time somehow I got off. They didn't have enough evidence, so I didn't have to serve any time or probation or anything. I fast forward a few years, I was still using, but I was going to school to be a drug counselor, and I ended up becoming a drug counselor. But I was still using, and I thought I was fooling everybody. And then I got on methadone to try to get off the drugs, but I was again still using. So I started tapering down off my drugs, but continued to do the methadone. And after a while, I was doing pretty good. I was working as a counselor. I was making decent money. You know, I was helping people. I was trying to change people's lives. But I can't. I don't really remember exactly what happened. But whatever it was, it kind of triggered me, and I ended up going back to using. And my job never drug tested, which I still don't know how to this day how I have a job that I'm working as a drug counselor, but they don't drug test. So I was there for about a year, and then finally they drug tested me, and I told them I was on methadone. So they didn't even really look at the test because if they had looked at the test, they would have saw that I was doing coke and dope at the time. So they gave me some leeway and they let me, you know, keep working, told me that I gotta try to taper off the methadone, but I didn't, you know, and I kept using. They tested me several times and I kept failing and they just kept giving me an out, giving me an out. They said I was one of the best counselors, kept giving me an out. I mean, now I know that was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, looking out for me. And after one point, they told me I had to go to rehab. So I went to rehab and I got clean for a short period of time. But I came back out, went back to work. I guess I let myself get overwhelmed because I've never been good at paperwork. And doing that paperwork stressed me out. Found myself using again. At this point, they, you know, were fed up and they won't beat no more. So they had to let me go. So now I'm back to being unemployed. I'm back to using. And so now I'm just walling out again. I ran out of money, so I couldn't cop drugs to sell. So I went and was stealing copper from the Home Depot. I would steal copper and strip it and then go sell it and get a couple $100s. So one day I went in there and I told myself, if I get caught, then it was meant to be. If I don't get caught, then I'm gonna keep doing it. So I did it on a real reckless way and I just put it in a cart, tried to walk out the door. And when I did that, somebody jumped on me. It was loss prevention, people from the place, and they took me out and I got locked up. So I sat for a while. Meanwhile, while I'm sitting, that's when I end up actually formally taking Shahada while I'm in jail with a bunch of brothers, real good brothers too. They started teaching me the deen. They started teaching me how to pray. I read more books then than I ever did Alhamdulillah for that. So that got me right back on track. So I was in there for almost a year while I was there. Like I said, I think that was a blessing in disguise because I learned so much. And I got out, got clean, and then started. I came out, went back to doing a drug counseling thing. Then I started an organization, and my organization is called Workers Revolutionary Collective. What we do is we help people that are using get clean. We also provide Narcan. We also do housing, because that's the other thing too. When I was locked up, I said I'm gonna do service. You know, when I come home, I'm dedicating my life to service. Everything's gonna be for the sake of Allah. So that's exactly what I did. I started doing that, and then I also founded Islamic Recovery, and I do motivational dawah videos, and I do a lot of different things like that. I'm always trying to connect people to the deen, and me with my organization speaking to people, I also give dawah at the same time as helping people with supplies. Um, Definitely thought I was going to speak a lot longer, but I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at now. I'm just continue to help people. Everything's for the sake of Allah. I'm not the richest man in the world, but as far as my relationship with Allah, you know, I'm living in abundance, and I love just helping other people. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I thought I was gonna go a little longer, but that's about it.